So everyone has different opinions on that, but it's something you need to decide, and it's not very expensive.
In general,
Just to get a little bit of extra help,
yeah.
peace of mind, and,
Yes,
yeah.
I wanna look into it.
Because like we say, we never ever intentionally do anything like that. I mean, most of us, the majority of us. I don't know, there might be someone out there that would, but most of us went into nursing because we're caring. We want to help people, not because we want to hurt people. Here's another question. Juan, your turn. Can you see from there?
I can't see. A patient is in pre-op holding and about to go into the surgical site for a below-the-knee application, which I know is a step.
It's not.
Is not a
It's not
step.
a step to universal precaution
Yeah.
goal stipulated by Joint Commission. Conducting a pre-procedure verification, washing your hands for sure, that is one. Pursuing what?
Pausing before
Pausing
surgery for a
before-
time out or
before-
marking the site with patient involvement.
I would say one, A.
A?
Let's be.
Actually, it's B.
B.
Right, because that's standard.
Yeah, now washing your hands before surgery is important for infection control,
It's one part of the time.
but universal protocol is basically preventing wrong site surgery, a wrong person. So, a little tricky, but we do want to do a pre-procedure verification. We do want to mark the site with patient involvement before we put them under, we don't want to do it after. And we do want to have a time out also with patient involvement.
That was a good question, Mom.
Thank you. Made you think, right?
Yeah.
So I read Patient Safety Network 2019 for some statistics, and I found out that wrong side surgeries on that particular site, now different sites give you different statistics, and I know it's all a big process in and of itself, said 59% of the time it's wrong side, 23% another wrong site, correct side. So maybe, well, I'll give you an example on the next slide what they mean by that. Wrong procedure, 14%, and wrong patient, 5%. I was like, ah. So the wrong side was actually a labia. There was cancer on one side and they took off the other.
Oh,
The wrong area was a spine. They were going in for like a kyphoplasty and they did the wrong vertebrae. The wrong person was a patient went in for cardiac surgery and it wasn't for them.
oh my gosh.
That's kind of big. And they say this happens an average of 1 out of 112,000 surgeries and one hospital every 5 to 10 years, and one hospital every 5 to 10 years. I thought that was, it sounds like a lot to me, but I guess if you go on the flip side, the percentages of accuracy is pretty high for this, right? Either way, one is too many, right? Especially if it was us. If we put ourselves in their shoes, if it's our family, we would know that, oh my gosh, if that ever happened to us, how devastating would that be? It would be devastating, what, physically,
Emotional.
emotionally, financially, right? It would be devastating. So, universal protocol says we must use a consistent verification process, so everybody in the hospital should use the same process. We should involve our patient so that we don't prevent the wrong patient from getting the surgery. We should mark the site, unless it's a site that doesn't have more than one side, like an abdomen for a C-section, for example. That is, I'm having my surgery on my belly. I guess you could still mark it though if you wanted. And procedure, to prevent the wrong procedure, you guys also get the patient involvement and do the timeout, right? So everyone's given an identity from birth until after death. There are a lot of disease, there are a lot of dead people.
For the epic.
It's going to be over in the other.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. And errors can happen from admission to discharge. When they get into the hospital. So I put that big sign there, caution. Right? Is everybody doing okay or does anybody need a break? You're fine?
I think it's interesting that like, before I was even a nurse and I was a tech, the hospital corporation that I worked for in Kentucky, every patient that went to surgery had to have a bracelet on each arm. And that
Each
was
arm?
each arm.
Wow.
And that was before
Huh.
they did all this patient identifiers, you know, asking their name, their birthday. That's before all this was like the thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, that's the only place I've ever worked in all this time that still does 2 bracelets.
So they do too, and they have to match.
Yeah,
And plus they ask them their name.
right. But I mean, they saw that that was important 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
That they have, when they go to surgery, it doesn't matter which side of the bed you're on, you've got to be
Oh,
able to
that's
identify the
awesome.
patient, because there's a bracelet on each arm.
Huh.
And if for some reason they only had one arm, then it got put on another extremity on the opposite side.
That is so interesting, right?
And I just thought of that when, I've never thought about it before, other than the fact that when I've sent patients to the OR from different places that I've worked, I always ask, do they need 2 bracelets? And people look at me like I'm crazy, but why would they need 2 bracelets?
Well, that's a good
Because
idea.
that's just the way it was always done.
I've never seen that done, except for on babies.
Hmm.
And that's for, so that they have the right mommy.
So,
Wow. Huh. Interesting.
so you can always identify the patient,
Yeah.
No
On
matter
either
where
side,
you
no matter
are.
what side.
which,
Because when I'm in the OR, sometimes I'll notice I'll have to do that. I'll have to go to the other side of the bed to find that bracelet. And I could see, hopefully not, but I could see a nurse getting slack, like they're busy or they're rushing and they're like, what's your name? And they don't really look at the bracelet because they don't want to run around to the other side. That would help a lot.
I mean, that was before we scanned bracelets when we gave
Yeah.
meds or anything like that, but
They did a study at a hospital, and they wanted to find out how often the wristbands were being used. And they said every single patient in that hospital, 100% of the time, got a wristband. That was not an issue. 61% of the time in their study, nobody checked it. They didn't use it. So it was there 100%, but only 61, or only 49, wait,
39.
39% of the healthcare workers checked it. And then 90% of the time, the patient wasn't told why they were getting that ID band. So they couldn't speak up and say, check my ID band, because they weren't told what it was for. So what this hospital decided to do was, of course, educate their patients and start using their name and their hospital ID number off the band with the patient for identification. And the first time they, of course, did this study, the first check that they did, it was 63 adverse events in 2009. Then they implemented this, and it went down to 19 in 2010, and with reinforcement and re-education, it went down to 10. So that study showed that, of course, using 2 patient identifiers and involving the patient definitely reduces adverse events. It did in this hospital. So it's easily preventable, a lot of it, just by using proper identifiers. And here, we use name and date of birth. We also scan the armbands. But we ask the patient, what is your name, what is your date of birth, scan and verify that they all match. And I just put that up there in the next slide. So choose the best actions a nurse should use to identify a patient before giving a medication to ensure their safety from the following choices. Ask their name and date of birth, glance at their ID band and state their name, verify their name and medication in the chart, or state their name and date of birth. What did you guys pick?
Okay.
A, right? Why is it important to ask their name and not state their name?
Guess I'll agree with you even if it's not right.
Right. Because sometimes you can go in a room and say, Mr. Jones, and he'll, yeah, and it's not really Mr. Jones.
Jose, Maria.
Yeah. Or
Here in the
people-
valley.
Right? Or people's names are similar, or they can't hear you properly, they're not listening,
There are meds.
they're on meds, so it's better to ask them. And same with when we give blood. The blood is like a medication. And there has been transfusion errors as well, so we have to go through all the little checks. Anytime we withdraw medication from a container, we need to make sure we label it, especially if we're not going to be using it right then and there. And that also prevents errors. And then we do have some medications that are considered high alert, like insulin, potassium, magnesium. The potassium, of course, depends on the concentration. But with these particular medications, when you scan the ID band and you put it in, it's going to ask for a second nurse verification, so it's wise to go ahead and make sure you do that. And actually look, not just, right?
Real fast.
Double check. Especially when it's a high amount of insulin. Like sometimes people here in the valley get 30 units, right? Just scary. And I always ask them when I have to give that big of a dose, is this what you always take? How much how much do you take at home normally with your insulin? And they'll tell me, oh, I take 30 units of N and 5 of R. Oh, really? Okay. And what's your usual blood sugar? I always ask them that because I get scared when you
Eight.
Right?
Oh, yeah, I never check it.
Or I never check it. I don't
It
know
says
what
error.
Right? So this is another little question. A nurse is administering medication to a patient on a hectic day shift. Just before the patient puts the pill into his mouth, the nurse hears a relative say, he has never been given a medication at this time of day before. The nurse should
Stop.
right? Stop what you're doing. Something is tingling in your brain. Something doesn't feel right. You don't want to ignore the visitor because they probably know that patient better than you. You don't want to just reassure them that there's a doctor's order because why?
They make mistakes too.
They're human. They make mistakes, right?
They put orders in on the wrong patient.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you don't want to have them continue taking it thinking the visitor doesn't know what they're doing because that's, again, they know them better than you. So you just want to stop and take that deep breath and review everything and make sure everything is okay, even though you feel rushed and hectic. And then that way you avoid making a mistake. Save your patient and save yourself. Another way to improve medication safety is to do medication reconciliation. So when our patients come into the hospital, we ask them for all of their medications, including vitamins and whatnot. And then the doctor reconciles medications on admission, transfer, and discharge. And that's one thing that they're working on here at NAP because a lot of doctors will just say, go ahead and continue the home meds. And they won't actually look at them. So the nurse needs to make sure they read back the medications to the doctors. And when we get this new Epic system in, they're going to actually make it to where the nurse cannot reconcile the medications through. The doctor has to do it. The nurse can put them in, but the doctor has to verify it. And I take that back a little bit. The nurse can do it, but it'll ask them who gave them permission, and then Epic's going to run reports, and they don't want the nurses doing it, and they're going to talk to the doctors about it. The ones that are getting the reports back saying that they're not doing their own, and they're going to go up the chain of command, they said, to the corporate CMO, all the way up if they have to, because they don't want nurses doing that. They want doctors doing that. Of course, if we have any question about the way they're doing it, we need to also speak up. And then improve effectiveness of communication is the other goal that I wanted to talk about. And you sure you don't need a break? So timely reporting of critical tests and results. What does that mean to you, Rita?
Well, like, yeah, let's say we have labs come in and they're abnormal, you need to report it quick because it's affecting the patient status, whatever they may be.
So if there's a critical lab result, we have to report it.
Abnormal, of course,
Yeah. Critical, like too high, too low, a big change from the usual,
Right.
even if it's not critical, but it's a big change. Our policy here says 30 minutes, but I'm thinking as soon as possible is what we
Right.
really want, but they gave us a little bit of a leeway. And then I was reading this really interesting article on Medley that said this includes all critical results. They had a patient that gave birth and had the placenta come out, and they sent the placenta to lab because they weren't 100% sure. And it ended up being a blood clot, not a placenta.
Oh my gosh, that big.
Uh-huh. It was big enough that the doctor thought it was a placenta, went back, whatever. And then the MD really, he wasn't worried about it, or she wasn't worried about it, went home and whatnot. The pathologist tried to call the OBGYN 2 times and left messages, said, hey, you need to call me. Sent a report to the physician, but the physician never saw it. And then the patient became feverish and called the MD office. And in court, the MD said that he told the patient to come into the office, but the patient denied it. The patient said that they just said, oh, you know, drink or whatever, and you'll feel better, and call us back if you don't. Well, the patient decided to went to the emergency room, and when the doctor came, the doctor tried to remove the placenta, which was kind of lodged in there, and ruptured the uterus.
Oh my god.
Patient had